The US Air Force and Boeing are teetering on the edge of a crisis. China may cut off titanium exports, a metal without which F-35 fighter jets and Boeing 787 passenger planes simply cannot be built. No titanium means no production. Aircraft stay grounded, factories shut down, and the entire US military and aerospace industry begins to collapse. China controls 35% of the global titanium market, and it's not just stockpiling the metal, it's using it as a weapon. Beijing has previously restricted exports of rare earth elements to pressure the West. Now, titanium is next. Why? Because the United States depends on it too heavily. That dependence makes it vulnerable. The most interesting part? Japan could potentially help, at least a little. It's the only US ally with the necessary production capacity. But guess what Trump is doing? He's slapping tariffs on Japanese goods. So how can Japan help when it's being punished itself? And this isn't just about military tech. Titanium is critical for medical equipment, robotics, and even nuclear power plants. If China cuts off supplies, America's dream of restoring domestic manufacturing collapses instantly. Boeing could lose billions, the Air Force could lose its edge, and NATO could lose its strength. Meanwhile, China, like a seasoned chess player, moves its pieces calmly, while Trump is still playing checkers. And here's the worst part. This problem can't be solved quickly. Other countries rely on China too, so there's really no one to turn to. Let's break down how Washington ended up in such a bind. But before we go deeper, we need to understand why the US is doomed if it can't find a way to replace Chinese titanium. This is not just a metal, it's a cornerstone of advanced technology. Without it, modern industry cannot function. It's stronger than steel, lighter than aluminum, and corrosion resistant. That's why it's used wherever reliability and strength are critical. The F-35 Lightning II fighter jet program, the pride of the US Air Force and the most expensive aviation project in history, is valued at $1.7 trillion, and the jets themselves are made up of 40% titanium, from the airframe to the engine. Each Boeing 787 Dreamliner contains tons of titanium in its landing gear, engines, and core systems. Demand is so high that last year Boeing found itself in the middle of a scandal for buying counterfeit titanium because it couldn't get enough from China. Now imagine what happens if China tightens exports even more. Submarines, missiles, body armor, robots, all of it depends on titanium. Without it, these industries won't just slow down, they'll grind to a halt. That's a heavy blow. The US produces less than 5% of the world's titanium. According to the International Titanium Association, 85% of American titanium needs are met through imports, and the lion's share comes from China. China produces 210,000 tons of titanium annually, which is 35% of global output. Russia and Kazakhstan contribute another 30%. These three countries control 65% of the market, and the US is hooked. The Pentagon, Boeing, and even companies like Boston Dynamics rely on foreign titanium, and China is ready to shut the valve. The situation is deteriorating for the US. China is rapidly catching up in military tech, and the Pentagon is rushing to modernize its Navy and Air Force to keep pace. China is building up its military fast. Trump is obsessed with this arms race. He wants to maintain US dominance in the air and at sea. While China builds advanced ships and jets, the US is betting on Boeing. It's been tasked with developing the next-generation fighter. But there's one big problem. And for that, titanium is essential, and China controls it. This creates a hard confrontation. One side has everything under control, while the other is trapped in dependency. Right now, the US Air Force is working on the NGAD program, a sixth-generation fighter jet called the F-47. In March 2025, Trump announced that Boeing had received a $3.5 billion contract. This aircraft is expected to eventually replace the F-22. The F-47 promises to be a breakthrough: advanced stealth capabilities, a powerful engine, and drone support for operating in complex zones, for example, against China's J-36 and J-50 fighter jets. The project builds on experience from the F-35 and B-21 programs and uses digital technologies to accelerate and reduce the cost of production. If all goes according to plan, the contract may grow to $20 billion. In parallel, the US Navy is advancing the F/A-XX program. It is designed to replace outdated models like the Super Hornet and Growler. The new carrier-based stealth fighter, expected to arrive in the 2030s, will most likely be built by either Boeing or Northrop Grumman. But right now, progress is being held back by funding disputes. This aircraft is critical. Chinese missiles can already strike American aircraft carriers from over 1,600 kilometers away, while the current F-35C has a range of only about 1,050 kilometers. The new jet will feature cutting-edge sensors, artificial intelligence, and drone integration, which is especially important in the Indo-Pacific, where China's Navy is rapidly gaining strength. And here's the main bottleneck: titanium. In April 2025, China imposed strict export restrictions on titanium and other critical materials, triggering alarm across the U.S. defense sector. Without this metal, projects like NGAD and FAXX could face severe delays or see costs skyrocket. Yes, the U.S. does have a deposit, for example at Mountain Pass in California, but the country currently lacks the capacity to process titanium at scale. Building such infrastructure would take years. America is hoping for help from Australia and Canada, but their contributions remain small for now. Recycling old titanium is also not yet efficient and far too expensive. China didn't end up in this position by accident. It built this dominance deliberately. The Bioti Group, now the world's largest titanium producer, manufactures aerospace-grade sponge titanium, a raw material that is vital to defense and aerospace industries. Since 2018, China has doubled its output, from 37% to 66% of global capacity, while the U.S. has let its own production decline. The Timet plant in Nevada, once a strategic asset, has been idle since 2020. And what about Pentagon reserves? Estimates suggest they would last only 12 to 18 months in a crisis. Clearly not enough to support programs like the F-35 and next-generation fighters. China is already signaling it may repeat its rare earth playbook, cutting off exports to punish Washington. And titanium could be next on the list, because Beijing knows exactly where the West's weakest point is. As mentioned before, Boeing is especially vulnerable. Nearly half of its titanium comes from China and Russia. Even partial export restrictions could paralyze production for years. According to Reuters, Boeing was already facing issues back in 2024. Falsified titanium documentation from Chinese suppliers has already raised serious concerns about quality. And if Beijing fully cuts off the flow, the issue will no longer be just delays. It will be a threat to the entire production chain. But this is not just about metal, it's about control. From the very beginning, China has been playing the long game. Through its Belt and Road Initiative, it secured access to key resources. For example, in Mozambique, China now controls 70% of titanium mines. Just the Moma mine alone, according to Africa Business Magazine, exports 90% of its output directly to China. But the most alarming aspect is the strategic fallout. In the Indo-Pacific region, where China is rapidly expanding its naval presence, a titanium shortage could undermine U.S. military superiority. As early as 2024, the Pentagon warned that a prolonged disruption in titanium supply could weaken NATO in the long term. By controlling such a critical material, China is rewriting the rules of the global economy. If Western companies cannot build aircraft, robots, or advanced technologies without Chinese titanium, they will have no choice but to play by Beijing's rules. The irony is clear. For decades, the United States championed globalization to cut costs and ended up handing China control over the world's most critical supply chains. Sanctions against Russian titanium were meant to punish Moscow, but in reality, they only deepened America's dependence on China. Back in 2022, the CEO of Airbus warned that losing access to Russian titanium could trigger a crisis worse than the microchip shortage. And if China joins in, there will be no backup plan at all. The West's aerospace, defense, and robotics industries could simply be brought to their knees. And all of this is made worse by Trump's trade war. His tariffs, intended as leverage against China, backfired, alienating allies like Japan and pushing the United States even further into a corner. So who's going to save America now? Realistically, no one. Domestic mines won't be up and running for several more years. Japan is constrained by tariffs and Chinese supply chains, and the Pentagon's reserves are far from unlimited. the United States is facing a national security crisis caused not only by external threats, but also by internal policy failures. To stay updated on how this story unfolds and to follow other global developments, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. See you in the next episode.